or building Cydia. However, there are many other things that I've done. One of them is Winterboard. So I did a Google Images search for Winterboard, and you get tons of themes that people make. But you can see Winterboard up here. Please let me see what your shirt. Okay. Winterboard in the upper left-hand corner here, you see, is a fairly simple thing that allows you to manipulate and move around this. It's these really fancy, colorful themes. I think it's really cool. But really, most of my time is not spent on these higher-level things. Most of my time is spent working on low-level tools like mobile substrate. And actually, Shernix, somewhere in the audience, Shernix made this icon, which I'm very happy with. We went back and forth forever. The hammer smashing through the settings cog, allowing you to make whatever kinds of random awesome changes you want to make. All right. Another thing that I spend a lot of time working on is script. So recently, I've added syntax highlighting and a bunch of other cool features. Just the sheer amount of time sometimes it gets burnt into making script do all the crazy things the script is able to do. If you haven't tried script, please try script.
Seriously.
Yeah, thanks.
It's awesome.
All right, another thing that I spent that has burned a lot of time, and unfortunately has actually burned a ton of money on random servers and things, is running the SHSH program, which is the man-in-the-middle attack that I run. I have a slide for that. Awesome. In fact, actually, there are tons of books related to that. Yeah, so we'll get to that in a second. So I think it actually might be the largest private sector man-in-the-middle attack ever. Which I'm actually kind of excited about. I mean, think about it, it's tens of millions of devices worldwide, literally billions of stored signature blobs, because every time you upgrade it's every device, every firmware, and then every firmware has like 20 blobs or so attached. We've got literally billions of these stored signature blobs, and entry-level encryption mistakes for the win. Somebody at Apple did not take encryption 101. All right, so. However, really, I mean, despite the time that I spend on these little tools, in a way, my job function is being a community manager of sorts. If you do a Google search, Google Images search for community manager, you find this is the first image that pops up. So actually, I went then ahead because I tried it out. Like an image that's really carefully constructed. I just want to steal it from somewhere. I found out where it comes from. So this is a group of casual, happy people smiling and standing, isolated over a white background. I bought a copy of it, which is different. I was kind of confused by that, but I now have an image representing it. But I'm not really a general community manager. I really specialize in dealing with developers. There's a better term for that, developer relations. So Google has a program, Google has a program, Google developers, where they do job postings. And they've got a job posted for a developer advocate. I think this guy looks cooler, honestly. So I'm a little bit happy with that. So where does all this happen? It does not, in fact, happen on Twitter for all the stuff that I do. All the stuff that I'm involved in happens on IRC. So like when Ryan mentioned, get on IRC, Pod2G, Cyril mentioned get on Pod2G, get on IRC. We really, in the developer community, we spend a lot of our time hanging out on random IRC channels on a number of different servers. So the iPhone dev team has an IRC server, and the Chronic dev has an IRC server, and I have an IRC server. And we have a number of channels by different groups on my IRC server, because it's kind of like this neutral thing. But IRC is where all this stuff happens. Except for when I'm in real life giving talks. So this is a shot from a talk that I gave. It was the Ignite talk at a thing called Foo Camp. And this video is posted online. If you search for Saurik Ignite, you might have to type in Foo, but I think you just do Saurik Ignite. It's only 5 minutes long. That's what the Ignite talk is. And it is probably the most, unlike this talk, where I'm hitting the next slide and getting surprised. It's like, oh, awesome, what comes next. In this talk, I just had to rehearse it over and over and over and over and over and over again. We're going to make it certain that I could get nailed on 5 minutes, the slides advance, etc. And it's kind of a cool talk for general people because it is not, the audience has no developers in it. Why says that not accurate? The audience was mostly people who were not developers. Now, sometimes I go to conferences. I have a lot of fun, actually. My Great Fest, which was the name of this same conference run by Craig last year in the UK, Here was me outside in the line. Somebody wanted Damo wanted my picture with my beard as his hair. I'm generally quite forgiving with the picture requests, by the way. And so I was standing out in line today. So I got a chance to meet a lot of the people who were coming in. I asked them why they were here. I asked them what they do. If they didn't do things related to jailbreaking, I asked them what their job function normally was. Which is interesting because I probably should actually keep that in mind that I did that. All right, so last year at my Great Fest, I gave a talk on all the questions that people asked me, and I tried to go through all of them, and I answered all of them. Like all of the, and I just sat around thinking about every time everyone asked me a question that normally I had a slide for, and I kind of put them in thematic order. And that way, as opposed to like in a Q&A session where you're like hopping back and forth, I just try to answer them all. But now it puts me in an interesting situation. Somebody, and I'm very thankful that actually watched my talk, Caleb Youngblood said, I seriously am trying to think of what Saurik will talk about on WWJC. He pretty much covered everything last year. Wow. And to be honest, I sort of felt like I did. So I can either repeat my talk from last year, which I think would be really awkward, or I can give something else that might be fun or might be interesting. And so that's what I'm trying to do right now. We'll see. We're lowering back down our way through the edge. All right, so I spent a bunch of time asking people what they did, and it turns out that actually there are a bunch of people here, first of all, who are not developers. Maybe they're interested in learning the program, they've started learning the program, they're not currently developers. So in a way, one of my normal, like, really deep dive talks, and even like the thing that I did in the VIP session, starts to become a little bit too in-depth. In fact, somebody tweeted, and I left their name off, I have no idea what's going on. In the VIP talk, which was supposed to be for people who, thought that the United States was not. So out here, right, the people who specifically chose to not do that track, I certainly need to not go into some kind of horrendous technical thing at some kind of super speed. So I also found out that a lot of people in the audience are bloggers. In fact, actually, it might even be that over half the people here are actually bloggers who are interested in blogging about the event. And then of the remaining people, about a third of those people are actually speakers and are friends of speakers. It's also being live broadcast. So both of these things have this kind of interesting also perspective where the audience is much larger than the people in this room, and therefore it becomes even more difficult to figure out who the audience actually is. Something we were discussing a couple nights ago at the speaker sponsor barbecue. Just asked, does anyone know who's coming to this thing? I'm like, everyone's coming to this thing. There's their users, and maybe there's some developers even, but it's I'm sitting here using this mic. You'll probably notice that I'm not very good at actually using the mic. Normally I just yell. So in the VIP thing I yell, it worked great. Of course, the mic is required so that people on the live stream can hear me, because if I just yell, they wouldn't be able to hear me. I was really thankful you had this mic though, because this mic is technically called a tie clip mic. I don't have a tie, and the place where you would normally hang it is ensconced in beard. So I ended up getting this horrendous scratching noise constantly, unless I put it over on the side, in which case, every time I turn my head, it's even worse than I'm currently doing with this microphone. Not to say I don't sometimes wear ties. By the way, I managed to find this picture just by searching for Saurik. All right. Today, I'm going to do a talk, which is imaged by this guy, however, which I think is probably the, stereotypically coolest looking guy. I kind of still prefer the developer advocate, but stereotypically coolest looking guy, which is what you get if you search for entrepreneur. Because this image is called Young Entrepreneur. It's used in a ton of places. I mean, that's not probably the full title. It's probably something like a slick-looking guy with hair standing in front of white background with blurred penis, something like that. And so it's us focusing on a particular thing that I recently added to a talk, which I've given on numerous occasions. So a talk that I'm kind of known for at this point is monetization in the iOS application ecosystem. Looking at all the different ways that money travels through the system, seeing where Apple takes cuts of what, who else is involved, etc. And I've got this massive, complicated Prezi slide that I use. It's actually gotten more complicated over the years. I filled in almost all the little spots. And this is like a 2-hour-long just marathon through like every single possible thing you can do with apps. And actually, this is like the center of the slide. There's a bunch of stuff that surrounds it too, which are little subtalks. But there's a specific one that I added when I gave another thing that Craig did at Indie Dev Lab, which is we'll start this. Okay. So one of the things that I ended up doing then is I'm really interested in business models. I'm really interested in seeing how people make their money because I think that it tells you what their actions are likely to be. So here's an example of this something called a 10Q. So when you have a company, you have to, like a publicly traded company, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, requires such companies to file quarterly earnings reports explaining how they make money, where the money comes from, what they do with the money, yada, 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 because the investors who may be potentially investing in the company need to have a way of getting access to this information so that they're informed, they're not just being swindled. All right. Google, as you can see, makes money on ads. And we actually, some people, it's interesting, some people speculate that they make most of their money on ads. Google tells us they make most of their money on ads. And if they lie to us, it's actually really bad for them. Okay? So they make like other revenues and not advertising revenues. It's just, yeah. Okay. It's also, however, interesting to point out that they break down the amount of money that they make on their own websites versus their party websites. Despite the fact that the internet is, ginormous, and there are tons of websites, and you've got AdSense running on all these websites. That doesn't total up to, even it's a little over a third or whatever. It was almost half. No, it's not. It's somewhere between a third and a half. Okay. Of the total of the amount of money that they make on their own website. So it's interesting to be able to do that. That's also not really what I'm talking about here. I included this slide because it's interesting. So Google actually buys, however, a lot of their traffic, and so the traffic acquisition cost. In the case of, for instance, Apple, people speculate that it is and you hear this number constantly. That Google pays Apple $1 billion a year in order to get access to their hardware. But if you actually look at the numbers that they have here, that would be times 4, brain not working. I mean, that would be over 60, 70% or so of their traffic acquisition cost, period. It turns out if you trace that reference back, there was just some guy who was just trying to explain in a fun little talk how traffic acquisition costs work and how the percentages might work out. And he just kind of said, well, let's say that it was 60% of their total amount of money they paid happened to go to Apple, and that got you ridiculous. Still not what I'm really talking about. That's not good. Okay, I'll start here and I'll fix it a little bit. Okay, this is Apple's 10Q, and this is actually what I'm going to spend some time talking about here. A lot of people like to talk about the App Store. That's what I normally give talks to developers, but luckily I can make this talk work for developers, for users, etc. A lot of people are looking at how Apple treats developers, and I would like to make the argument that Apple does not treat developers very well, and people say, wow, but the developers make them so much money, and my argument is going to be that they don't actually make them much money at all. That, in fact, the goal that Apple has is only very tangentially related to developers. So, here is Apple's 10Q. People are taking pictures of this. You just do a Google search, Apple 10Q. It's finance.apple.com. You can get all the historical information that they have. It's these beautiful PDF files. All right, so this is the 10Q from earlier this year. It's not the one from the most recent one. Where do you think on this chart the App Store is? The place that most people would think is, the closest thing you got here is iPhone and related products and services. Maybe software service and other sales, but that number just seems so low, right? It's like the iPhone, and also that's probably Apple software, right? iPhone and related products and services. Well, what is that? Well, you can see E includes revenue from sales of iPhone services, and Apple branded and third-party iPhone accessories. This is all hardware and some cloud service type things. I includes amortization of related revenue deferred for non-software services and embedded software upgrade rights. This is related to a horrendously complicated accounting issue, which is that when Apple releases a new version of iOS and a bunch of people get it for free, they're technically legally not allowed to do that unless there's some compensation for it. So when they sell the iPhone, they set aside some portion of the money that they sold it for as money that would have been spent by people on upgrades of iOS that would then depreciated over some number of years. And they have to treat that as a really complicated accounting measure. But neither of them are the App Store. In fact, if you look at music-related products and services, footnote D, that includes revenues from the iTunes Store, App Store, and iBook Store, in addition to sales of iPod services and Apple-branded and third-party iPod accessories. They lump it in with all of the music stuff. All right, so now looking back at that then, you can already see that this category that the App Store is lumped into is 10% of the category that, this is by the way, net